Hello. Yes, my mic's on because I tested it. Uh, this is my podcast. I'm Brandon. If you go to brandoncunningham.com, you can subscribe and get this sent to your email. It doesn't cost anything. You're free to give if you want to, but that's how you do it if you want it in your email every day. So we are in Acts chapter 16, and I'm going to read from the New Living Translation because does not contain the word church and all these other things that other translations do. So I challenge you to read different translations. They will really open up your mind. Hebrew is a beautiful language. It's a hard language, but it shows you way more in the Bible than you see by just reading the English. So let's get going in Acts chapter 16. Saul came down to Derbe and went to Lystra, where lived a Talmud named Timothy, and just a young disciple named Timothy. He was the son of a Jewish woman who had come to trust and a Greek father. All the brothers in Lystra and Iconium spoke well of Timothy. Saul wanted Timothy to accompany him, so he took him and did a Brit Milah because of the Jews living in those areas, for they all knew that his father had been a Greek. As they went on through the towns, they delivered to the people the decisions reached by the emissaries and the elders in Jerusalem for them to observe. Accordingly, the congregations were strengthened in the faith and increased in number day by day. They traveled through the region of Phrygia and Galatia because they had been prevented by the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, um, from speaking the message in the province of Asia. When they came to the frontier of Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Yeshua would not let them. So after passing by Mysia, they came to Troas. There a vision appeared to Saul at night. A man from Macedonia was standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." As soon as he had seen the vision, we lost no time getting ready to leave for Macedonia. For we concluded that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. Sailing from Troas, we made a straight run to Samothrace. The next day, we went to Neapolis, and from there, we went on to Philippi, a Roman colony and the leading city of that part of Macedonia. We spent a few days in this city. Then on Shabbat, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we understood a minyan met. Keep in mind, too, this is Luke writing it. So when he says Paul did this and then we did that, he's talking about himself going with him. A minyan was just a small gathering of believers that would pray, or Jewish believers that would pray. That's where, if you've seen the movie that the Minions, that's where that comes from. Not just the word, not anything else really. But we sat down and began speaking to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in fine purple cloth. She was already a God-fearer, and the Lord opened up her heart to respond to what Saul was saying. After she and the members of her household had been immersed, she gave us this invitation: "If you consider me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay in my house." And she insisted till we went. Once, when we were going to the place where the minyan gathered, we were met by a slave girl who had a snake-like spirit that enabled her to predict the future. And that's really important because the New Living Translation says, one day as we were going down to a place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit that enabled her to tell the future. They leave out the snake part, and that's really important. We'll see that. Um, she earned a lot of money for her owners by telling fortunes. This girl followed behind Saul and the rest of us and kept screaming, "These men are servants of God. Ha Elion. They're telling you how to be saved, God Most High," basically. She kept this up day after day until Saul, greatly disturbed, turned and said to the spirit, "In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, I order you to come out of her." And the spirit did come out at that very moment. Notice too, it says she kept this up day after day. This was a lot, and he had just had enough. But when her owners saw that what had come out was any further prospect of profit for them, they seized Saul and Silas and dragged them to the market square to face the authorities. Bringing them to the judges, they said, "These men are causing a lot of trouble in our city since they are Jews. What are you doing? What they are doing is advocating customs that are against the law for us to accept or practice since we are Romans." The mob joined in the attack against them, and the judges tore their clothes off of them and ordered them be flogged. After giving them a severe beating, they threw them in prison, charging the jailer to guard them securely. Upon receiving such an order, he threw them in the inner cell and clamped their feet securely between the heavy blocks of wood. Around midnight, Saul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. So are we doing that in our moment of, inadequacy, of jail? We're stuck. We can't do things. Are we singing and praying? While the other prisoners listened attentively. Suddenly there was a violent earthquake which shook the prison to its foundations. All the doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer awoke, and when they saw the doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, for he assumed that the prisoners had escaped. But Saul shouted, "Don't harm yourself, we're all here." Calling for lights, the jailer ran in, began to tremble, and fell down in front of Saul and Silas. Then, leading them outside, he said, "Men, what must I do to be saved?" They said, "Trust in the Lord Yeshua, and you will be saved, you and your household." Whereupon they told him and everyone in his household the message about the Lord. Then, even at that late hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed off their wounds, and without delay he and his people were immersed. After that, he brought them up to his house and set food in front of them, and he and his entire household celebrated their having come to trust in God. The next morning, the judges sent police officers with the order, "Release those men." The jailer told Saul, "The judges have sent word to release both of you, so come out and go on your way in peace." But Saul said to the officers, "After flogging us in public when we hadn't been convicted of any crime, we are Roman citizens. They threw us in prison. Now they want to get rid of us secretly. No, oh no, let them come and escort us out themselves." The officers reported these words to the judges, who became frightened when they heard that Saul and Silas were Roman citizens. They came and apologized to them. Then, after escorting them out, requested them to leave the city. From the prison, they went to Lydia's house, and after seeing and encouraging the brothers, they departed. So there's so much in here that if you don't understand Jewish customs, they don't make a whole lot of sense. But the reason this whole household was saved was because the head of the household dictated the faith of the household. So they followed him, they believed him, and so they believed the message that these guys were preaching to them. And that was important. Also, Timothy's mother was a Jewish believer, and his father was a pagan. The reason Peter insisted Timothy get circumcised is because Timothy was born a Jew. Jews determine if a child is Jewish by the mother, not the father. So since he was a Jew, but he wasn't circumcised, he would lose some of that credibility. So that's why he wanted him to do it. I think that Eunice and her mother Lois were fully assimilated into the Gentile Roman world, so they just never did it. We see this with Jews today. They just kind of live, they'll marry who they want to marry and anyone they fall in love with. It's not dictated by the family anymore, or to marry somebody in their faith. Also, remember that since they lived there, they wanted to get along with everybody, so they didn't want to make a big deal out of anything. Christians do the same thing. We don't want to make our faith a little bit too prominent. It might offend somebody or upset somebody. You don't see that in other faiths, but you see it in Christianity. We're supposed to be quiet and silent and just get along with everybody. So even though Timothy was technically a Jew, his father was responsible for making sure he had a Brit Milah, a circumcision. But so Paul was basically validating Timothy's birthright by making sure that he was circumcised because he was born a Jew. He was doing what his father didn't do. And his mother probably just felt like it was a little too much trouble to do. So Paul knew if Timothy was going to be an effective Jewish evangelist, he would have to be true to his Jewish heritage and not live like a Gentile and be true to the law of Moses. So he needed a circumcision. Paul thought it was Yeshua who blocked their way. The Gentile population would now deal with this mostly pagan, or the Gentile population Paul would mostly deal with now is all pagan. They're not some Jews and Gentiles. It will be predominantly Gentiles, non-believers. So his first missionary journey, some were Gentile God-fearers and had some knowledge. So that benefited him a little bit. But after a few days, on Shabbat, the 4 disciples went to a place people met for prayer. Verse 17 says a minyan met there, and that was just 10 or more. So a minyan is a group of 10 or more, which is what I just said. That was the minimum for a synagogue prayer. So this shade of purple that she was a dealer in was called tekhelet, and it was required for making of zitzit and for ephods, the things we learned about in the Old Testament. So she would supply the material for making those things. It was also used for the fringes of certain ceremonial robes. Lydia was a God-fearer, so she had a basis to understand Paul's teaching. That's what made it a little bit easier for her. So understanding that the whole household would accept, that helps us understand what it means in verse 31 when it says, trust in the Lord Yeshua and you will be saved, you and your whole household. So me being saved doesn't save my household. That's not what this means. It means me being saved, I can lead my household to this. People respected the leader of the household and would follow whatever faith he presented to them. So the original text says that the girl had a pythona spirit. That's why that snake-like spirit matters. The python guarded the Delphic oracle, whose name was Pythia. So it was a prestigious office held by Greek women. She would perform as a priestess at the shrine and was the most powerful woman in Greece. So this slave-like girl carried her same Pythona spirit, the spirit of Pythia, basically. So the accusation is they are not Roman citizens. Luke was obviously a Gentile, and Timothy probably looked like a Gentile. Perhaps the jailer had heard Paul speak, and that had something to do with it. But the jailer brought Paul and Silas out to his own home, and they baptized them all. I mean, that's just an amazing occurrence that maybe we don't see if we don't think about what all happened in this moment. They had gone home with Lydia, the God-fearing Gentile, and now they're doing the same with the jailer. So going into people's homes, meeting them where they're at, not in buildings or cathedrals, but where they live. That's what mattered, and that's what Paul was doing. So without the ruling in Jerusalem of the Jerusalem Council, and without Peter's encounter that God fixed his theology, saying that Gentiles could be ritually clean, the Jewish men eating in homes of Gentiles, that wouldn't have been possible. They wouldn't have been able to accept that hospitality, and they wouldn't have been saved. It could have cost them an eternity had Peter not realized that his theology was wrong. And somehow the church made that about food, even though Peter clearly says, and we talked about this, that it was about Gentiles being ritually clean. So that's chapter 16. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless. Don't forget, love God, love people, and change the world.